system. But that was like kind of the cause of that whole thing, was the fact that it didn't have a rating system in place.
The controversy over games like Mortal Kombat leads to the formation of the IDSA in 1994. Soon after, the ESRB rating system is introduced. Despite the controversy, fighting games hit their peak that same year. Street Fighter the movie is released, followed by the Mortal Kombat movie 1 year later. But how much longer will these two fighting giants stay on top? New innovations will bring new challengers, and soon, just 2 dimensions won't be enough. By 1993, 2D fighters are everywhere. While the makers of Street Fighter and Mortal Kombat churn out sequel after sequel, Sega's Yu Suzuki works on a new kind of fighter.
The
president of Sega realized that Capcom had a fighting game called Street Fighter 2 that was very popular. He asked me to come up with a game that could be competitive in this field, and I said, I don't know if I'll be successful, but of course I'll give it a try. I decided that I'd like to combine the 3D that I was always interested in with a fighting game.
Oh, wow. The early pioneers in 3D fighting games, you have to speak about Yu Suzuki and the Virtua Fighter series. Just when that came out in the arcades, it was astounding. People had been used to fighting in 2 dimensions, moving back and forth and maybe jumping over one another, but not actually moving in 3 dimensions. And seeing fighters who had depth, it really was a revolution.
The Virtua Fighter really opened up a can of worms because they opened up a whole new realm of possibilities for the player. It was a coup for Sega because it was just brilliant. What was great also was each character had a real technique. I mean, it was Taekwondo, it was Kung Fu, it was, Thai kickbox, whatever it was wrestling, it was like a real thing, drunken style. And it was just very, very, very cool.
And just like with the 2D craze, other companies come out with their own clones.
Virtua Fighter really birthed this whole 3D fighting revolution, which was then followed on by, games like Tekken. All those games really took this 3D fighting methodology to a whole new level.
Tekken kind of concentrated on the story of Heihachi and Jin, like the Mishimas, and a lot of stuff going on with those characters. And it seemed like every single Tekken, you wanted to know what was going on with the storyline.
Tekken, it has that whole techniques, the counter stuff, but it's much faster than Virtua Fighter. And I think people who are like jazzed about the Street Fighter games, there's like, is there a 3D fighter out there that's kind of more for our fighting style? And I think Tekken was that game.
And other companies like Tecmo, they just took the ball and absolutely ran with it. And you can see that in Dead or Alive.
I like Virtua Fighter, but if I use different ideas to describe it, I would say it's an old traditional sushi restaurant. And on the contrary, DOA is like a sushi bar with roller skating girls serving wasabi on the sushi. It's fun.
As competition between fighting games grows increasingly fierce, developers jump through hoops to draw in gamers.
But then you'll get the people that are really hardcore about fighting games. They're kind of bored with Street Fighter, bored with Mortal Kombat. They want something different.
So Capcom introduced Super Street Fighter 2, the new challengers, and that was released in 1993, and that introduced 4 more new characters, Cammy, DJ, Fei Long. They also added a combo meter for the first time. I mean, players had always said, oh, okay, well, am I doing this 3 or 4 hit combo? But now you actually would see it on the screen at the time.
And then you have, which I think blew everyone away because it had weapon-based combat. You had samurai sword, you had nunchaku, you had bow staffs, you had spears. And it was beautiful because they had all these swooping effects and whooshes and sparks when weapons clanging together. And then you have Dead or Alive. I can be fighting someone, they can attack me, I can counter it, but then they can counter my counter, and I can counter their counter. That engine is just genius.
But as the games grow more complex, they begin to have a negative impact on the industry they helped save years earlier.
The more complex the game gets, like Virtua Fighter was, you're definitely going to lose players.
By moving anything to 3D, there's obviously the risk of making a game too complicated or, adding too many buttons. And I think there have been some fighting games that just, are just not fun because there's so much to do or the learning curve is so high.
These were games that took a lot of coordination, and it excluded 2 major classes of people. The casual gamer, the businessman that wanted to play on his lunch hour, and women.
The
problem with fighting games was that, like, there was a period of maybe like a year where anyone could get into fighting games, and after that, it was hard for like somebody new to walk in the arcade and not just get their ass kicked, to just get laughed out of the place. So it kind of kept new people from getting into it after a while.
As the arcade market declines again, fighting games will have to find a new place to call home. Towards the late 1990s, the arcade market is down for the count. But at home, it's a different story.
At one point, players were still playing fighting games in the arcade, and they would play at home on lesser versions of the same game. Like Super Nintendo, people would play Street Fighter 2, but they'd still go to the arcade because it looked better, it played better.
But then with a game like Tekken in the arcades was built on a version of PlayStation hardware. So what you have is a game that is very easy to be transitioned to the home console. So what happened was that these guys who were spending quarters night after night in these arcades, spending sometimes hundreds of dollars a month, were able to buy a console like the PlayStation and play it basically for free at home once you bought the game for 40 or 50 bucks.
By the mid to late 90s, players could get something that was almost as good as or better than the arcades on their home consoles for less money. So why do you go to the arcades to play your games when you don't have to?
So what happened was that people started gravitating towards playing a lot of these fighting games in the home. And, the home consoles were so powerful then that it was basically, arcades kind of lost their luster.
Not only are home console fighters matching their arcade counterparts, some are even surpassing them.
When the Dreamcast launched in September of 1999, one of its launch titles was Soul Calibur, a game from Namco. And that was one of the best fighting games, and it sold extraordinarily well right out of the gate. After the launch of the Xbox, Microsoft was really lucky to have Mr. Itagaki and Team Ninja sign on to do a Dead or Alive 3 game for the Xbox. Every console needs a great fighting game to launch. That's one of the core genres of consoles, and Xbox got that great fighting game, Dead or Alive 3, and it really helped the platform.
Dead or Alive 3 did very well on Xbox. They showed the world exactly what the Xbox could do. He expanded on the notion of multi-tiered stages. Not only could you knock somebody off a platform, say, but you could knock them off a huge platform, and they would go through a floor and bounce down.
But the old 2D fighters that started it all aren't gone for good. Old rivals team up, and new franchises such as the Guilty Gear series ensure that gamers with the 2D itch have a place to go.
3D fighting games have been a focal selling point now in the fighting game genre. A lot of players don't want to hear about that. They still love 2D games, and even me personally, I prefer 2D fighters. I think the best 2D fighter out right now is Guilty Gear X2 Reload.
Capcom had suffered some reversals. Street Fighter 3, for instance, was not a big success in North America. SNK's later King of Fighters games, 99 and beyond, got kind of a mixed fan reaction. So they got together and decided to, let's settle our differences and give fans what they want. So they created a lot of different crossovers, Capcom vs. SNK and Capcom vs. SNK 2, which were straight 2D fighters.
Today, fighting game tournaments such as the Super Battle Opera Championships and the Evo 2K competitions feature both 2D and 3D fighting games. Thousands of players from all around the globe duke it out for cash prizes and pride. Meanwhile, fighting games continue to evolve.
Now game machines are powerful enough. A big trend with fighting games is that now, it's not just a static environment, you can actually use the environment against your opponent. Even a game like Def Jam, Fight for New York, you can throw your opponent in front of the subway train and have the subway train run them over.
Mortal Kombat, I think, is like the success story. They died in the arcades, and then all of a sudden they come up with Deadly Alliance, which kicks major butt. They kind of went back to the roots. A lot of blood, gore, fatalities, but they just overhauled the engine. They moved to a 3D space. It was just phenomenal.
Online is going to become a really important part of fighting games. And I think the idea of facing off against your friend in a fighting game is really, really exciting. And that sort of brings back what it feels like in an arcade to be against each other and punching each other. And it's like, hey, I got you there, and having fun that way.
Fighting games have gone from ruling the arcades to dominating home consoles. They've pushed gaming to its limits, both technologically and morally. There's no denying that fighting games helped shape the world of gaming into what it is today.
Every time I see a new game, the new Mortal Kombat, or the new Dead or Alive, Ultimate, I'm just blown away how much we've evolved. Games are going to evolve, they're going to be much better. In the end, the real winners are us, the gamers. We get to play these awesome fighting games.
You win! Have to use the codes.
BBA, BBA.
I've seen the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles naked.
L1, L1.
Zelda naked.
Left, left, left.
Mario, no pants.
AB, AB. R1, R1, R1.
Lakers, naked. Master Chief, Pittsburgh Steelers, Manchester United.
But naked.
R1, 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 R1.
Get the latest cheat codes and walkthrough strategies for Oddworld, Stranger's Wrath. Cheat. Tuesday night at 10 Eastern, 7 Pacific.